Hello, this is Off Leash with Eric Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. This is the last in a series of episodes focused on wildly unconventional policies and politics under Donald Trump in this new Trump era. Now I want to talk about Doge. Doge, led by Elon Musk, was interesting. Donald Trump and Elon Musk did an interview with Sean Hannity. Really interesting dynamics there, by the way, because, Trump doesn't really share the spotlight necessarily. I mean, he's magnanimous, right? Yep. He's with people. But to have a member of his administration and the President of the United States interview together is really fascinating. But it's the most powerful man in the world, next to the richest and most successful man in the world. And their interplay was fascinating. I mean, these guys really appreciate each other. Elon Musk demonstrated that he respects the president's, that his authority comes from
the president,
the people through the President of the United States. No doubt about it. Nothing unclear about that whatsoever. And then he is operating under Donald Trump's authority for sure. Now, the president is directing the activities of Doge and the Department of Government Efficiency, where they're finding corruption throughout the federal budget. We've all known it's there, but now we're getting, he's got his team of this geek squad,
yep.
right? Using AI to, basically screen through the entire federal budget. And now he's going to come to the Defense Department. And
the largest discretionary spend that we have to deal with as taxpayers. And what a wonderful target to go through and to shred unbelievable waste.
What is Doge going to find in the Pentagon budget?
Waste, fraud, and abuse at every level, from manpower, administrative overhead, basic costs, maintenance costs, and massive overpay for even the hardware and systems that they buy. There's literally waste at every level in every organization.
How much of that do you think would be direct Pentagon spending, and how much of it will be through defense contractors, through that waste?
You have about 50% of your total cost is manpower. You have about 30% is equipment, call it CapEx, buying stuff from defense contractors, and 20% is, call it services, maintenance. You're going to find waste in all those buckets. You're going to find that there's an enormous amount of overhead that we have on the manpower side that we shouldn't be spending. There's a lot of redundancies. There's a lot of headcount reduction, automation, et cetera. On the equipment side, my God, it's going to be extraordinary how much cheaper, better, faster we could buy things if they open up the throttle or open up the floodgate and buy more like the automotive industry and less like government. And on the maintenance side, again, very narrow procurement policies forces them to overpay. So you're gonna, I would say you're probably overpaying on the hardware side by 3 to 5 times what you should be, and this is really the same for maintenance.
That's extraordinary. So the military-industrial complex has thrived through secrecy for decades now.
Yeah, they hide behind classification.
This is going to be presumably if you take a look at the success Doge has had so far uncovering corruption, for instance, USAID, where we now see some real facts, hard data about how the U.S. government has been paying these NGOs for this far leftist agenda throughout the world, and even working against the best interests of the United States through USAID. Yep. Really extraordinary. Do you anticipate we're going to see something similar? Because it seems like the cockroaches have been able to hide in the dark for a long time.
Mark, I've said years ago, a successful Trump presidency would be the clearest indication would be a fall in real estate prices in the greater DC area. And I'm proud to say the median home price has already fallen by $140,000 in the immediate DC area because the rats are fleeing the ship.
That is an extraordinary number. That's 100,000 plus
140,000. Yes.
That's the median.
Yep.
Unbelievable. So the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, announced that he would like to see an 8% reduction in the Pentagon budget over each year over 5 years, totaling $50 billion at the current FY 2025 level.
Yep.
For FY 2026, he's talking about. Tell me what that, is 8% enough? Tell me, give us some context to 8% of the budget.
That's an excellent idea. I think I tie it back to General Electric. Back in the 90s, 80s and 90s, when GE was a real company before it went woke, Jack Welch drove a very financially disciplined organization. And they would have an expectation for every department, productivity expectations, that this year your budget is here, next year your budget is here. You have to find 2 to 3% productivity, and you put that goal out there. It drives people to find ways to cut their budget. Putting an 8% goal out there is extremely reasonable because they haven't had any kind of goal for cost savings for decades. And so you putting that into commanders' mission, they then put it out to their people to say, okay, find ways for us to do our job better, cheaper, faster next year than we do this year. That is an extremely achievable number, and I'd say they can do much better than that. They'll find bigger savings, also the way a company, a disciplined financial organization like GE used to do it, was you'd have incentives for employees to come forward with ideas, and you actually get a small slice of the savings. Putting that kind of idea out to the troops, you'd be shocked at what people come back with.
Sure, he created the notion of intrapreneurship.
Yep.
People inside acting like entrepreneurs for the sake of the organization.
Yep.
So
that's how you actually drive change in the organization, is unlocking people's imaginations, and you delegate some of that decision making, and I think you'd be amazed at what people come back with.
So Pete Hegseth's authority obviously comes to the President of the United States, but his credibility comes from his history as a warrior himself, and the fact that he wants to return the Pentagon, the Defense Department, to a warrior ethos. So,
yeah,
Pete,
focusing on lethality and merit. What a concept for a military to do that, and it's been great to see him up and out to do a PT with the troops, and arrives in Germany late at night, and he's out there at 06 the next morning with the guys from 10th Special Forces Group. That's exactly what the troops love to see. They want to see leaders that are forward, that are with them, and joint suffering is the best way to build teamwork.
What does that do to, morale has had to have been just miserable for the past 4 years. What does that do to morale?
It's fantastic for morale, because when you're warriors who join the military to want to defend their country, when they're getting sent to diversity and just in completely mind-numbing stupidity lectures, completely 180 out from what they joined the military for, versus people that are talking about being lethal and being hard to kill, and focusing on being the most capable lethal military in the world. It's why the recruiting numbers have gone through the roof, and the recruiting deficits that the Biden administration suffered from will certainly, I would say, they've already been reversed.
Yeah, and look, I'm in the strategic communications business. I'm a storyteller, right? And visual storytelling is everything. The image of Pete Hegseth doing deadlifts, next to our warriors, next to guys
next to a guy that looks like an oak tree. Yeah, it's fantastic imagery.
is especially in contrast to his predecessor.
Yes, our predecessor, he was so obese and so unhealthy and so useless that he could actually disappear for days and nobody knew where he was, and no one thought to question where he was. It's a different paradigm. I hope it sends shivers through the spines of all the out of shape, largely useless flag officers that pollute the halls of leadership there, because they've all been pencil whipping, meaning, I would say, falsifying the reports, their PT tests. Okay, that kind of corruption is endemic through the military, and I'd say one of the great Doge functions should be to line up all the flag officers with some independent auditors and let them run their tests, let them run their PT tests. That would be, in terms of a symbol to the rest of the military, is to let their leaders adhere to the tests that everyone else has to.
And you saying this has been endemic throughout the ranks, and is it basically put a thumb on the scale for people who are not qualified to be in the military?
100%.
No way.
Yep.
That's mind-blowing.
So again, crawl, walk, run, and Pete's getting his team together, and I wish him well.
So Donald Trump says recently that he wants to meet with Russia and China to talk about an agreement to cut, all agree, multilaterally, to cut defense spending by 50%. Now, wildly unconventional idea. Donald Trump, gets people talking, gets heads exploding, and we make actual real progress. Obviously, that would be a tremendous shift, a historic shift, if he could get anywhere close to that. Let's say it was 10%, 25% agreement to reduce defense spending multilaterally. Is that a possibility? Is that realistic? What do you see happening? What kind of talks do you see taking place with those partners?
I'm sure with those
adversaries.
counterparties. Look, I'd say that's probably some Elon Musk thought injected in the conversation, because I'm sure he would rather have resources put towards getting to another planet, making the human population on Earth a multi-planetary species. Fantastic. Those are great aspirational goals to go for. The U.S. right now should cut a significant chunk of our defense spending because it's wasteful. It actually makes us less effective and less lethal.
But Trump is a master with peace through strength, right? He demonstrated that in his first term. So through these cuts, it doesn't demonstrate any stepping back from peace through strength, correct? I mean, it's just efficiency.
Here's a wild idea for you. Maybe Musk says he wants to get to Mars. Fantastic. But maybe it's a different kind of Mars. Mars, the god of war. If you remember back in the 80s, there was the brilliant Pebbles, the Star Wars pitch that Reagan was doing about a space-based system to shoot down incoming nuclear missiles. With as low as they're driving the space launch costs through SpaceX, perhaps a brilliant Pebbles Star Wars type system is very possible, which would negate a country from being able to shoot ballistic missiles at each other. Maybe that's a way to eliminate actual threat of nuclear war in our world.
So just invest in deterrence.
Yes.
So let's exit with this. Looking ahead, what other reforms do you expect to see from Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Defense Department?
Significant lowering of overhead costs and headquarters staffs and fewer general officers. We could do with a lot less. Much wider competition for the defense, both products, CapEx, and for the operations and maintenance stuff. There's an enormous efficiency reforms that can be done, and I think they're on the way to doing it.
What should discussions between the Defense Department and defense contractors look like? What should be the basis of those conversations? Because look, they provide an essential service to the United States, these companies.
Sure.
But they're bloated and they've been allowed to run wild.
The over-consolidated ones, call it the Big Five cartel, should be broken up, okay? An antitrust discussion with them, and open up the opportunities for bidding to small and medium-sized companies significantly more. Is competition will drive efficiency and innovation.
But you think the threat of antitrust action will be a good club to use with them, to place on the table?
Sure, and even without trying to enforce some antitrust action, you could do that by where you choose to spend your money. And again, there's been lots of talk about defense reform before in previous administrations. The difference is if Musk is personally committed to funding serious primary challengers of the defense appropriators that don't want to play ball, that is the cudgel that matters.
Yeah.
Truly, that's if you look at the Schwerpunkt, the inflection point of all this, it's how do you threaten the people that continue to spend too much money in the status quo? That's what has to be changed.
Yeah, and I believe that is Donald Trump may be the most powerful president ever. He got a mandate sweeping the 7 swing states. He had the popular vote, but he also has Elon Musk, who's sleeping in a cot in the old executive office building on weekends, with his team of his Geek Squad. And he's made it very clear, I will finance the primary opponents for people who step out of line. Even though we have a narrow majority in the House, I believe that's a power we've never seen a president have in his back pocket.
Agree.
Extraordinary. So last word, we'll exit on this, which is on private military contractors. Based on these shifts, dramatic historic shifts in the Defense Department that we're just now getting started with, is there a new era ahead for us with private military contractor solutions?
I wouldn't call it a new era. I would call it a swinging back to a normal historic era. Because for the last 50, 60 years, post-World War II, it's kind of been an all-government thing, all-government approach all the time, the neocon approach. And when you look back over the last couple hundred years of history, the private sector has played a very significant role in stabilizing overseas resources that America cares about, that are strategic. And so there's a lot of ways the private sector can do things cheaper, better, faster, if they're allowed to innovate. And they've been largely blocked from doing so by a very blockheaded Washington. And I think that era is changing.
Well, I have a lot of faith that Pete Hegseth is going to know, who to consult about private military contractor solutions in the future.
So again, if you look back 30, 40, 50 years, when the national security apparatus, right, the people at the NSC talking, well, what problem do we do about this? Their default was to always go to the Pentagon, and which is why we have that much spend, that much bloat, that much inefficiency. Now there's going to be other people, because the Pentagon needs to heal itself and refit and become lethal and effective again. There's a lot of space for private sector to help. Just like the government doesn't buy weapons from itself, it buys it from the private sector. Mm-hmm. Let the private sector compete.
That's healing itself is a great phrase. I mean, you're right. There's got to be this massive healing that takes place because, the cockroaches have been allowed to hide in the dark.
Look, when you look at the obesity epidemic in American society, unhealthy food, too much sugar, too much processed foods, it's kind of like the Pentagon. Too much sugar, too much fat, too much spending. Let smart people find innovative ways to pare that down and to become the lean, mean fighting machine it should be.
Awesome, great last words. Look, this is only on Off Leash you're going to get this kind of insight. Don't forget to go to our sponsor, unplugged.com/offleash to get your unplugged phone today. That's it for this episode of Off Leash with Eric Prince. I'm Mark Serrano.